Here I have a sleeveless dress, really pretty sleeveless dress, but I want to add a sleeve to it. It comes with a matching lace jacket, but I'm going to remove the sleeve from the jacket and insert it into the armhole of the dress. So we're going from a jacket to now a full sleeve dress. All that's coming up next on Sewing with Nyler. The first thing we need to do is to remove the sleeve from the jacket. And since we're going to have to adjust the sleeve to insert it into the dress, rather than taking the sleeve out with a seam ripper, which I do it sometimes, but in this case, I'm just going to cut across the seam and simply cut that seam off. And when I cut that seam off, it's going to automatically release the sleeve. Now that the sleeve has been removed, one thing you want to keep in mind is when you take the sleeve out and before you take the other one out, you want to mark them. This one I just took out is the left side, so I'm just going to put a sticky note with an L on it for left and then pin it to the left sleeve. And that way I'll know which one is which. And you don't have to mark both of them. So I'll go ahead and take the other sleeve out and I'll show you what we're going to do next. So both sleeves have been removed. And you can save this fabric, and I'll probably show you something I'll do with it later in a future video. But don't throw it away because this is good fabric, and you can use it for something else. Now let's move on to the dress, which is sleeveless. And some ladies, especially some of the plus-size ladies, they don't like to have their arms exposed. And that's why I'm going to attach the sleeves to this dress. So what we want to do now is open up the armholes of the dress. It should be a little easier to see these stitches because of the contrasting of the fabric and the lace. So I'm going to go ahead and open that up now. I'm just going to get it started. And once I get it started, I'm going to use the razor to finish it. And now that it's started, I'm simply taking the razor and I'm just hitting the seams, the actual stitches themselves. And when I do that, it just opens them right up. So I'm going to go ahead and open up the whole armhole this way. Both sides. Now, if there's a paper interfacing in your armholes, such as in this case, it's a stabilizer, and it's used to help to keep the armhole firm. And we don't really need that, so I'm just going to take it out on both sides. You can actually see when you lay the dress down and you put the sleeve here, you can see that it looks like it's going to fit perfect. Now, what I've done for the armhole is I went ahead and I pinned the liner and the lace together so that they would stay together as I start to pin the sleeve in place. Now on the sleeve, what we might want to do is this portion up here, it should be a little bit gathered. Maybe about from the top, you're looking at about 2 inches on each side of the center of the top. And you can actually see the top because there's a point here, and that's the center. So I'm going to put a pin right there in the center. And that's going to remind me that that's where it is. I'm going to do the same thing as on this one, on the left sleeve. And you can see the center point here also. So I'm going to put a pin right here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to sew on the right side. I'm going to stitch a gathering all around the top so we can slightly gather it together as we insert the sleeve. And we're doing this because when you put a sleeve in on the shoulder, it should bunch up a little bit, like gather a little bit at the top of the shoulder so that it kind of sticks out on the top of the garment. Now that that's done, I'm going to work the right side first. Now you want to start by turning the armhole to the inside so you can insert the sleeve in that way. And we're going to take the sleeve, and I'm just going to go ahead and kind of spread out the stitches a little bit, leaving just a little bit at the top. I'm going to lay it right here on the table so you can see what I'm talking about. So you see how you get just a little bit of a curve, and that's fine. That's exactly what you want. So now I'm going to take the sleeve and I'm going to insert it from the underneath, and I'm going to match up the armhole seams together. And because I already have some pins here in the armhole, I'm just going to take these out and just pin them along with the sleeve. Now I'm going to go up to the top where my pin is because that's the center. So I'm going to insert my center right there and then put the pin there also. Now I'm going to work from the underarm and around until I get to the top and the center of the sleeve. And I'm pulling it not tight, but just taut enough so that it lays nice and flat and smooth. And then I'm just simply pinning it in place. And as you can see, when you get to the top, you see that you got a little bit of gathering here. When you pull it, you'll see it's a little too big. So now I'm just going to work on the other side and we're going to come and meet it. So we make sure that we get the gathers even on both sides. You can see I'm pinning them in place. And so you can see when I get to the top of this one, it's a little full also. So I'm going to take my pin out and kind of shift the gathers around so that they come out on the other side. And now when I do that, I put my center back and now it matches up on both sides. So now I'm just going to pin that in place. I know that this fabric is kind of dark and it's kind of hard to see with these dark colors, but once I get it all stitched in place, you'll see that it all fits good together. And this is what you want. So let's go to the other side, and there the other side matches up perfectly as well. So I'm going to turn this to let you see how that sleeve is inserted and how it looks really nice. So I'm going to repeat the same thing for the other side. So all there's left to do now is just to stitch. Now I'm stitching a very thin seam allowance because that was what was originally in the armhole anyway. And it's very, very narrow seam allowance. I'm actually stitching it close to the presser foot, and I'm using the presser foot as my guide. And now the sleeves are all stitched in place. And it looks pretty much like it came with the dress. Nice. I think it turned out really good. So now you want to do some finishing. To do finishing, I'm just going to do a large zigzag stitch to stop all the unraveling. And before I do that, I'm going to trim off some of these ragged edges and make the zigzag stitch nice and even. So you just simply trim off those excess edges, those threads, those loose raw threads, just trim all of those off. And that way you get a very nice uniform stitch. I have my stitch set to the largest zigzag stitch, and I'm just going to start in zigzag. I wanted you to see the difference. When you zigzag, it holds all those seams together. And this is what it looks like when it's not zigzag. See the different layers, they want to come apart. So see, you got 3 layers here. Well, actually there's 4 layers, and they're just all over the place. So by zigzagging it, you can keep them all locked together in one place. Okay, so now I have it all zigzagged. And it's all done. I think it turned out rather nice. What you can do now is you can just lightly press it and use a pressing cloth when you do so, especially with this lace. And you'll do that so that the seams lay down toward the dress, toward the top of the dress, rather than the sleeve. And by doing that small zigzag stitch, you really don't see the seam, and that's what you want since the sleeve is all lace. So our project is finished. We got the sleeve removed from the jacket and inserted it into the dress. I hope that this tip has been helpful, and I hope that you try it. Happy sewing!